London, 1851. The Merryweather estate blazed with light, every window of the grand manor aglow with the warmth of 100 candles. From the gravelled drive, the sound of carriage wheels and the melodic laughter of young women spilled into the cool evening air. It was the most anticipated social event of the season, the coming-out ball for the two eldest Merryweather daughters. In the shadows of the servants' quarters, Cordelia Mallow pressed her back against the cold stone wall, clutching a silver tray of petits fours to her chest. At 20, she was neither servant nor guest, something worse, the landlord's forgotten middle daughter, hidden away by her father like a shameful secret. "You there, girl? The tray is needed in the ballroom, Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, appeared suddenly in the narrow corridor. "Yes, Mrs. Finch." Cordelia lowered her eyes, her slender fingers tightening around the tray. "And for heaven's sake, stay out of sight, Mr. Merryweather was very specific. No embarrassments tonight." The words strung, though they were not new. Since her mother's death 5 years ago, Cordelia had become invisible within her own home. Her father, Jonathan Merryweather, prominent London landlord and social climber, had remarried a widow with 2 beautiful daughters of her own. In the reshuffling of the household, Cordelia, with her quiet manner and plain features, had been relegated to the margins of family life. She believed, with the certainty that comes from years of reinforcement, that love and admiration were reserved for those blessed with beauty and charm. Her stepsisters, Amelia and Louisa, possessed both in abundance. Cordelia possessed neither. "Remember, child," Mrs. Finch softened slightly, "the walls have ears tonight. Every servant will be reporting back to their masters about the Merryweather girls. Your father cannot afford any irregularities." By irregularities, Mrs. Finch meant Cordelia herself, the daughter with no dowry, no connections, and no prospects. The daughter who read mathematics texts in secret and kept ledgers of her father's rental properties when no one was watching. The daughter who understood exactly why her father needed this ball to succeed. The Merryweather fortune was crumbling. Only Cordelia knew how desperately her father needed advantageous marriages for Amelia and Louisa. Only she had seen the mounting debts, the mortgages on properties, the increasingly desperate letters from creditors. Slipping into the grand ballroom was like entering another world. Ladies in silks and satins twirled across the polished floor, their jewelry catching the light from the massive crystal chandeliers. Gentlemen in formal evening wear stood in clusters, evaluating potential matches with calculating eyes. Near the center of the room stood her stepsisters, resplendent in matching gowns of emerald and sapphire. Beside them, her father and stepmother beamed with pride as a succession of eligible bachelors requested introductions. "They say the elder Miss Merryweather will have a duke before the season ends," whispered a footman as Cordelia placed her tray on a side table. "And the younger one has caught the eye of that railway baron's son," replied another. Cordelia backed away, careful to keep to the edges of the room. She had nearly reached the servants' entrance when a deep voice behind her said, "You seem to be the only person in this room not entranced by the spectacle." She turned, startled, to find herself face to face with a tall gentleman she did not recognize. His attire marked him as one of the elite guests, dark evening wear impeccably tailored, a gold watch chain visible across his waistcoat. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, intelligent, assessing, with an intensity that made her feel suddenly visible. "I beg your pardon, sir," she said, lowering her gaze. "I was just attending to my duties." "And what duties might those be? You're dressed too finely for a servant, yet you carry trays like one." His observation was direct, his tone curious rather than accusatory. Before she could answer, her father's voice boomed across the room. "Your Grace, there you are. Come, you must meet my daughters." The gentleman turned, and Cordelia took her opportunity to slip away through the servants' door. Only as she hurried down the corridor did the realization strike her she had been speaking to a duke. And for one brief, impossible moment, he had seen her when no one else did. In the small room she kept in the east wing, far from the family quarters, Cordelia sat at her small desk and opened her ledger. By candlelight, she worked through her father's accounts as she did each night, recording rents collected, bills outstanding, and the growing gap between them. The truth was stark on paper. The Merryweather finances were collapsing. Only the marriageability of her stepsisters stood between the family and ruin. A knock at her door startled her. She quickly covered the ledger with a piece of embroidery, her supposed evening occupation. "Enter," she called softly. "Mrs." Finch appeared, her usually stern face troubled. "Miss Cordelia, your father requests your presence in his study, immediately." The walk to her father's study felt like a march to judgment. Jonathan Merryweather rarely acknowledged her existence, let alone summoned her. Something was terribly wrong. Her father sat behind his massive oak desk, his face thunderous. Her stepmother stood by the window, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Neither looked up when Cordelia entered. "You wish to see me, father?" Her voice sounded small even to her own ears. "Explain this." He thrust a leather-bound book toward her, one of her accounting ledgers. Cordelia's heart plummeted. "It's a record of the properties and their accounts, sir." "And by whose authority do you keep such records?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I noticed discrepancies in the published accounts, I thought." "You thought to spy on my business affairs, to keep secret ledgers behind my back." Her stepmother turned from the window. "Jonathan, the girl has clearly been raised without proper understanding of her place. This is what comes of educating females beyond their station." "I meant no harm," Cordelia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The accounts from Mr. Orville didn't match the rents collected. Some of the properties listed don't exist, and others show inflated incomes." Her father's face drained of color. "You will never speak of this again to anyone. Do you understand me?" "But father, Mr. Orville has been embezzling from you for years. I have proof." "Silence," he slammed his fist on the desk. "You know nothing of business matters." "I know enough to see that we're nearly bankrupt," Cordelia said, her quiet voice gaining strength. "And I know that Mr. Orville is the cause." For a moment, her father stared at her as if truly seeing her for the first time. Then his expression hardened. "You will leave this house tomorrow. I've arranged a position for you as companion to Lady Gresham in Cornwall. The carriage will collect you at dawn." "Jonathan," her stepmother interjected, "is banishment necessary? Perhaps a suitable marriage?" "With what dowry?" he snapped. "The girl has nothing, and now she knows too much." Cordelia stood perfectly still, her worst fears confirmed. She was being erased from the family completely, sent away like an embarrassing secret. "May I be excused to pack my belongings?" she asked, surprised at how calm she sounded when her world was collapsing. Her father waved his hand dismissively, already turning his attention to other matters. "Yes, yes. And remember, not a word about the accounts." As she closed the study door behind her, Cordelia heard her stepmother say, "Thank goodness the Duke didn't notice her tonight." Imagine the scandal if he'd realized there was a third daughter hidden away like that. Xavier Aldridge, the Duke of Thornfield, stood at the window of his London townhouse, watching the early morning fog curl around the gas lamps. Sleep had eluded him, his mind returning again and again to the curious young woman he'd encountered at the Merryweather ball. "More coffee, Your Grace?" His butler appeared silently at his elbow. "Yes, Parker." "And bring today's correspondence." The butler returned promptly with a silver tray bearing letters sealed with various family crests. Invitations, no doubt, to the endless parade of balls and dinners that constituted the London season. Xavier sifted through them with little interest until he came to a letter bearing his solicitor's seal. Breaking it open, he scanned the contents with growing concern. "Parker, have my carriage brought around. I need to visit Mr. Whitby immediately." An hour later, Xavier sat across from his solicitor in the man's cluttered Fleet Street office. "I'm afraid it's all there in black and white, Your Grace," Mr. Whitby said, spreading papers across his desk. Your rental properties in Cheapside have been mismanaged. The agent, Orville, has been collecting funds but reporting only a portion to your accounts. And Merriweather, you're certain he's involved. He's Orville's partner in several ventures. Our sources suggest the Merriweather finances are in disarray despite appearances. The man is desperate, mortgaged to the hilt, and looking for wealthy matches for his stepdaughters to save himself. Xavier drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. And yet someone in that household has been keeping separate accounts, accurate ones. Yes, most curious. Our informant mentioned ledgers kept by a third daughter, one who doesn't appear at social functions. Mr. Whitby adjusted his spectacles. Apparently, she's being sent away this very morning, quite suddenly. Xavier stood abruptly. Where? To Cornwall, I believe, Lady Gresham's estate. Have my fastest carriage prepared for immediate departure to Cornwall, and send word to Lady Gresham that I wish to call on her today on a matter of some urgency. The solicitor blinked in surprise. Today, Your Grace, but Cornwall is many hours' journey. Then I'd best depart immediately. The road to Cornwall stretched interminably before Cordelia as she sat alone in the cramped postchaise her father had arranged. She had been permitted to bring only one trunk. Her books and papers had been deemed unnecessary for a companion whose primary duties would involve reading aloud to an elderly lady and managing her correspondence. The countryside rolled past, each mile taking her father from the only home she'd known and the family that had rejected her. Yet strangely, with each milestone marker, Cordelia felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in years, she was free from the weight of invisibility, free from pretending to be less than she was. In her reticule lay the one ledger she'd managed to hide, the most damning evidence of Orville's theft and her father's willful blindness. By late afternoon, the coach began to climb the steep coastal roads of Cornwall. Lady Gresham's estate, Thorncliffe Manor, perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the wild sea below. As they approached, Cordelia could see it was once a grand property, though now showing signs of neglect. The housekeeper who greeted her seemed flustered. "Miss Mallow, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Lady Gresham is indisposed at present, but I'll show you to your room." The chamber was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a desk positioned beneath a window that faced the sea. Cordelia unpacked her few belongings, wondering what a new life would hold. A knock at her door revealed a maid with a tea tray. "Begging your pardon, miss, but Mrs. Harper thought you might want refreshment after your journey." "Thank you." "That's very kind." Cordelia smiled at the young woman. "I'm Cordelia Mallow." The maid curtsied. "I'm Bate, miss. I'm to be your lady's maid during your stay." "My lady's maid? There must be some mistake. I'm to be Lady Gresham's companion." Bate looked confused. "But Mrs. Harper said you were a special guest of her ladyship. She had me prepare the blue guest room for you, not the companion's quarters in the east wing." Before Cordelia could question this further, the sound of carriage wheels on gravel drew her to the window. A magnificent black carriage with a ducal crest on the door had pulled up to the manor entrance. "Oh my," Bate gasped, peering over Cordelia's shoulder. "That's the Duke of Thornfield's carriage. What could bring him to Thorncliffe?" Cordelia felt a chill run through her. The Duke of Thornfield, the same man who had spoken to her at the ball, who had seen her when no one else did. Had her father sent word ahead? Was she to be further humiliated by having her disgrace made public? "Bate, please tell Mrs. Harper I'm fatigued from my journey and will take dinner in my room tonight." The maid looked disappointed. "But miss, if the Duke is calling, surely you'll want to." "Please, Bate, I'm not fit for company." After the maid left, Cordelia paced her room anxiously. What could the Duke possibly want at Thorncliffe, and why today of all days? The coincidence was too great to ignore. Her fears were confirmed an hour later when Bate returned, her eyes wide with excitement. Miss Mallow, the Duke has asked specifically to see you. Lady Gresham requests your presence in the drawing room immediately. Cordelia's hands trembled as she smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress. There was nothing to be done about her appearance now. She followed Bate downstairs, each step heavier than the last. The drawing room of Thorncliffe Manor retained echoes of its former grandeur. Faded tapestries hung on panelled walls, and furniture that had once been fashionable now showed signs of wear. Near the fireplace sat an elderly woman Cordelia presumed was Lady Gresham, her silver hair arranged beneath a lace cap. And there, standing by the window overlooking the churning sea below, was the Duke of Thornfield. He turned as she entered, and Cordelia was struck again by his penetrating gaze. Unlike their brief encounter at the ball, she could now observe him properly. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with dark hair and features that spoke of intelligence rather than conventional handsomeness. "Ah, Miss Mallow," Lady Gresham said, her voice surprisingly strong. "His Grace has travelled all the way from London to speak with you. Most intriguing." Cordelia sank into a curtsy. "Your Grace, my lady. I confess I'm at a loss to understand what matter could be so urgent." The Duke approached, studying her with those unsettling eyes. "Miss Mallow, I believe you have information regarding certain financial irregularities involving property management in London." Her heart raced. How could he possibly know about the ledgers? "I'm afraid I don't understand what you're referring to, Your Grace." "I think you do." He spoke softly, for her ears alone. "Your father's partner, Orville, has been embezzling funds, not only from your family but from other property owners, including myself." Cordelia glanced nervously at Lady Gresham, who was watching their exchange with keen interest. "Oh, don't mind me, child," the old woman said with a dismissive wave. "Xavier and I are old friends. He's asked for my assistance in a delicate matter, and I'm more than happy to oblige. Especially if it means puncturing Jonathan Merryweather's inflated reputation." The Duke gestured to a nearby chair. "Please, Miss Mallow, I give you my word that you are not in any danger." "Quite the contrary." Slowly, Cordelia sat, her mind racing. "How did you know about the ledgers?" "I have sources within many households, Miss Mallow. When discrepancies in my own accounts emerged, I began an investigation. It led to Orville, then to your father, and finally to you, the unseen daughter with an extraordinary aptitude for numbers." Cordelia's cheeks burned. "My father sent me away because I discovered the truth." "I suspected as much." The Duke pulled a chair closer, sitting across from her. "Miss Mallow, I need your help to expose this fraud. Your ledgers contain the evidence required to bring Orville to justice." "And my father, what will happen to him?" The Duke's expression softened slightly. "That depends largely on his degree of complicity. Was he a knowing participant or merely negligent?" Cordelia thought of her father's reaction when confronted with the evidence, not surprise, but anger at being discovered. "I believe he knew, Your Grace. Perhaps not the full extent, but enough." Lady Gresham cleared her throat. "The question now, my dear, is whether you're willing to help expose this scheme, knowing it may bring disgrace to your family name." The weight of the decision pressed down on Cordelia. Her father had cast her aside without a second thought, had hidden her away as if her very existence was shameful. And yet, could she be the instrument of his downfall? "I need time to consider," she said finally. "Of course," the Duke stood. "But I must ask that you remain here at Thorncliffe under Lady Gresham's protection. Your knowledge makes you valuable and potentially at risk." "At risk, surely you don't think?" "Men like Orville have much to lose," he said gravely. "I would not put it past him to ensure your silence by whatever means necessary." Lady Gresham rang a small silver bell. "You'll stay here as my guest, not my companion. I've never needed a companion anyway. Ridiculous notion. Your father simply wanted you hidden away where you couldn't cause trouble." The reality of her situation began to sink in. Cordelia was now caught between loyalty to a family that had rejected her and a sense of justice that demanded the truth be revealed. "May I ask one question, Your Grace?" she said, as the Duke prepared to depart. "Certainly. At the Merryweather ball, did you speak to me knowing who I was?" For the first time, she saw uncertainty cross his aristocratic features. "No, Miss Mallow. I spoke to you because in a room full of performance, you alone seemed authentic. Learning your identity came later." After he left, Cordelia stood at the window watching his carriage disappear down the coastal road. Behind her, Lady Gresham chuckled softly. "Well, my dear, it seems you've made quite an impression on the Duke. In all the years I've known Xavier Aldridge, I've never seen him pursue anything with such personal interest." Cordelia turned, confused. "Personal interest? This is a matter of business, surely." "Is it?" Lady Gresham's eyes twinkled. "Then why, I wonder, did he ride day and night to reach Cornwall ahead of you? Why not simply send his solicitor to retrieve your evidence?" The implication was so absurd that Cordelia laughed despite herself. "My lady, you cannot possibly suggest the Duke of Thornfield has any interest in me beyond my ledgers. He's one of the most eligible bachelors in England. Half the debutantes in London are vying for his attention. Including your stepsisters, I understand." Lady Gresham's smile was knowing. "Yet here he is in Cornwall, chasing not them, but you." That night, Cordelia couldn't sleep. The waves crashed against the cliffs below her window, their rhythm matching her tumultuous thoughts. What Lady Gresham had implied was impossible, a fantasy born from an old woman's romantic notions. And yet, the Duke had seen her when no one else did, had spoken to her when others looked through her, had travelled across England not to court her beautiful stepsisters, but to find her, the invisible girl. No, she mustn't entertain such foolish thoughts. The Duke needed her evidence, nothing more. Once he had what he needed, she would fade back into invisibility, while her father and stepsisters would face the consequences of their actions. The thought brought her no satisfaction. 3 days passed at Thorncliffe Manor with no word from the Duke. Cordelia found herself enjoying Lady Gresham's company far more than expected. The elderly woman was sharp-witted and well-read, with a refreshingly direct manner. "Your education has been peculiar," Lady Gresham observed as they sat in the library one afternoon. "You've somehow acquired knowledge of business and mathematics, but were denied instruction in music and drawing, the supposed essentials of a young lady's education." Cordelia smiled. "My mother believed in practical education. After she died, my governess continued her approach until my father remarried. My stepmother dismissed the governess immediately, deeming her methods improper for a young lady of good family." "And your father allowed this?" "My father," Cordelia hesitated. "After my mother died, he seemed to forget I existed. When he remarried, I think he was relieved to have my stepmother take charge of all domestic matters, including me." "And when did you begin keeping the ledgers?" "About 2 years ago. I found discrepancies in household accounts and traced them back to the property management. No one noticed what I was doing because no one was watching me." Lady Gresham studied her with shrewd eyes. "Being invisible has its advantages, doesn't it? You see things others miss. You hear things not meant for your ears." "Yes," Cordelia admitted, "though I would have traded it all for simply being seen." "Well, my dear, someone has certainly seen you now." Before Cordelia could respond, Mrs. Harper entered the library. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but His Grace the Duke of Thornfield has returned. He's brought Mr. Whitby, his solicitor, and requests an immediate audience." The Duke looked travel-worn when Cordelia entered the drawing-room, as if he had been riding hard for days. His solicitor, a thin man with spectacles and an air of perpetual concern, was arranging papers on a side table. "Miss Mallow," the Duke bowed slightly, "I apologize for the delay in returning. There have been developments." Something in his tone made Cordelia's heart race. "What sort of developments, Your Grace?" He gestured for her to sit. "Orville has fled London, taking with him significant sums from various accounts. Your father claims ignorance, but his properties are being seized by creditors. And my stepmother, my stepsisters, they've retreated to your stepmother's brother's estate in Kent." He paused. "I should inform you that rumors are circulating about a third Merryweather daughter, one with intimate knowledge of the scandal." Cordelia closed her eyes briefly. "So I've been discovered." "I'm afraid so. Society thrives on such revelations. The invisible daughter who brought down her father's house of cards is too delicious a tale to ignore." Lady Gresham snorted derisively. "Society's memory is short. They'll find a new scandal by next week." "Perhaps," the Duke conceded, "but Miss Mallow's position is precarious. She cannot return to London without facing considerable unpleasantness." Mr. Whitby cleared his throat. "If I may, Your Grace, we still require Miss Mallow's evidence to build our case. Without her ledgers and testimony, prosecuting Orville will be difficult should he be apprehended." Cordelia stood and walked to the window, watching the storm clouds gathering over the sea. "So I must choose between protecting my family's remaining dignity and seeing justice done." "Not necessarily," the Duke said quietly. She turned to find him standing closer than she'd realized. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her breath catch. "What do you mean?" "There is a third option. One that would protect you from scandal while allowing justice to take its course." He glanced at Lady Gresham, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid I don't understand." The Duke took a deep breath. "Miss Mallow, Cordelia, I am proposing marriage." The room seemed to tilt around her. "Marriage to me, but that's absurd." "Is it?" His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. "As my Duchess, your actions would be above reproach. No one would dare question your motives or integrity." But Cordelia struggled to form coherent thoughts. "Your Grace, you cannot possibly want to marry me. There are dozens of beautiful, accomplished women from good families who would make suitable duchesses. I am plain, disgraced, and penniless. You are also honest, intelligent, and uncommonly brave." He stepped closer. "Qualities I value far more than beauty or dowry." Lady Gresham chuckled. "Well said, Xavier." "Mr. Whitby looked thoroughly uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should wait outside while this personal matter is discussed." "Yes, do," Lady Gresham said, "and I shall accompany you. Young people deserve privacy for such conversations." She rose with remarkable agility for her age and ushered the protesting solicitor from the room. When the door closed, Cordelia found herself alone with the Duke. Her mind raced with objections, yet she couldn't seem to voice any of them. "You must think me mad," he said, breaking the silence. "The thought had occurred to me, Your Grace." A smile touched his lips. "Xavier, if you're considering becoming my wife, you should use my name." "I'm not considering it," she said quickly. "I cannot." "Why not?" "Because you're offering marriage as a solution to a problem, a business arrangement, not because you—" She stopped herself. "Not because I care for you," he finished her thought. "You believe I'm incapable of genuine affection. I believe you're a practical man, making a practical decision." He moved to stand before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his gaze. "Cordelia, there is nothing practical about my feelings for you. From the moment I saw you at that ball, the one woman not performing for society's approval, I have thought of little else. You've barely known me a week. And yet I know the essence of you, your courage, your intelligence, your loyalty even to those who don't deserve it." He touched her cheek gently. "I know that you keep your true self hidden because you believe no one wants to see it. I'm asking you to let me see you, Cordelia, all of you." Her heart thundered in her chest. "I don't know how to be seen. I've been invisible for so long." Then we shall learn together. He took her hands in his. I'm not offering you a perfect love story, Cordelia. I'm offering you a beginning. Will you consider it? Looking into his eyes, Cordelia saw something she'd never expected. Hope, not just his, but her own, reflected back at her. I will consider it, she whispered. London buzzed with scandals that summer. The Merryweather financial collapse dominated conversation in drawing rooms and gentlemen's clubs alike. The disappearance of Mr. Orville, the seizure of properties, and the quiet retirement of Jonathan Merryweather to a modest cottage in the country provided endless fodder for gossip. But by August, society had found a new obsession: the impending marriage of the Duke of Thornfield to a mysterious young woman who had been living under Lady Gresham's protection in Cornwall. Rumours swirled about her identity. Some claimed she was a foreign princess, others that she was Lady Gresham's long-lost granddaughter. Few connected her to the Merryweather scandal, and those who did kept their suspicions private. One did not speak ill of a future duchess, particularly one with the formidable Lady Gresham as patroness. On the morning of her wedding, Cordelia stood before the mirror in her chamber at Lady Gresham's London residence. The woman who gazed back at her seemed a stranger, dressed in ivory silk, her hair arranged with pearl combs, her eyes bright with a confidence she was only beginning to feel. The door opened, and Lady Gresham entered. "Well, my dear, are you ready to become a duchess?" "I'm not certain one can ever be ready for such a transformation." "Nonsense, you were born for this role, not because of your family name or fortune, but because of your character." The old woman adjusted Cordelia's veil. "Xavier sees in you what I saw from the first, a young woman of exceptional quality who has been overlooked by fools." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lady Gresham's butler entered, his usually impassive face troubled. "My lady, there are visitors below asking to see Miss Mallow. Mr. and Mrs. Merryweather and the Misses Amelia and Louisa." Cordelia's heart sank. "My father and stepfamily here today." "Shall I send them away?" Lady Gresham asked, her expression hardening. Cordelia considered for a moment. "No, I will see them. Please show them to the blue parlour." "Are you certain?" Lady Gresham looked concerned. "They don't deserve your courtesy." "Perhaps not, but I need to face them as the woman I am now, not the girl they chose to forget." The blue parlour felt smaller than Cordelia remembered, or perhaps it was the tension that seemed to compress the air. Her father stood by the fireplace, diminished somehow, his once commanding presence reduced to nervous energy. Her stepmother sat rigidly on the sofa, while her stepsisters huddled together on a love-seat, their expressions a mixture of awe and resentment. "Cordelia," her father stepped forward, then halted, as if unsure of his welcome. "You look well." "Thank you, father, I am well." She remained standing, forcing them all to look up at her. "We heard rumours," her stepmother said, her voice brittle, "that you were to marry the Duke of Thornfield. We didn't believe it, of course. And yet here you are." Amelia leaned forward. "Is it true? Are you truly marrying the Duke today?" "Yes." The single word fell into the silence like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock across their faces. Louisa recovered first. "But how? Why would he choose you when he could have had anyone? When he could have had—" "Me," Amelia finished, her voice small. "He danced with me twice at the Havershams' ball. Everyone said he would call on me." Cordelia felt a surprising wave of pity for her stepsister. "I cannot speak to his Grace's reasons. You would have to ask him yourself." "This is why you exposed your own father," her stepmother said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. "To curry favour with the Duke. To steal what should have been Amelia's." "That's not true." Cordelia kept her voice steady. "I revealed the truth because it was right, not to gain advantage." Her father cleared his throat. "We've come to offer our congratulations, Cordelia. And to ask, that is, to hope that once you are Duchess, you might see fit to help your family. Our situation is quite reduced, as you know." So there it was, the real reason for their visit, not reconciliation but opportunity. The invisible daughter had suddenly become valuable to them. I see, Cordelia studied her father's face. You disowned me, sent me away without a word of explanation to anyone, let society believe I didn't exist. And now you come asking for my help. You're my daughter, he said, a hint of his old authority returning. Despite everything, blood ties remain. Yes, they do. Cordelia moved toward the door, then paused. I will speak to my husband after the wedding. I cannot promise anything, but perhaps something might be arranged to ensure you don't face destitution. Not for your sake, father, but for my mother's memory. She opened the door to find Xavier waiting in the corridor, concern evident in his expression. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Yes, she took his offered arm. I am finally exactly where I'm meant to be. As they walked away, she heard Amelia's bewildered voice behind them. But she's so plain. How could he possibly choose her over us? Xavier's hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. They still don't see you, do they? No, Cordelia smiled up at him. But you do, and that's all that matters. The wedding at St. George's, Hanover Square, was the social event of the season. The cream of London society filled the pews, craning their necks for a glimpse of the Duke's mysterious bride. Lady Gresham sat in the front row, resplendent in lavender silk, beaming with proprietorial pride. In the back of the church, the Merriweather family huddled together, their reduced circumstances evident in their recycled finery. They watched as the invisible daughter, the one they had hidden away and forgotten, walked down the aisle toward one of the most powerful men in England. For once, all eyes were on Cordelia. As she reached the altar, Xavier took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. Are you ready? He whispered. Yes, she answered, her voice clear and certain. I am finally ready to be seen. The years that followed were not without challenges. Society initially regarded the new Duchess of Thornfield with suspicion, watching for signs that she was unsuited to her elevated position. But Cordelia's natural intelligence and quiet dignity gradually won respect, if not always affection. Xavier's business affairs flourished under his wife's careful management. The scandal surrounding Orville and her father faded from public memory, though Cordelia never forgot the lessons it had taught her about trust and visibility. Her family received a modest allowance, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. Her stepsisters eventually made respectable matches, though neither achieved the social heights they had once anticipated. Her father never fully recovered his standing in society, a consequence he bore with bitter resignation. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Xavier found Cordelia in the library of their country estate, a sleeping infant cradled in her arms, while their 4-year-old son played quietly at her feet. There you are, he said softly, careful not to wake the baby. Lady Gresham has arrived for her visit. She's already instructing the staff on how the nursery should be arranged. Cordelia smiled. Some things never change. And some things change entirely. He sat beside her, his arm encircling her shoulders. Are you happy, Cordelia? She leaned against him, considering the question. I am seen, she said finally. By you, by our children, by the world. After a lifetime of invisibility, that is happiness beyond measure. You were never truly invisible, he told her. You were merely waiting for the right eyes to find you. Outside the window, rain began to fall, soft and steady against the glass. But within the warm circle of her family, Cordelia Aldridge, Duchess of Thornfield, once the forgotten middle daughter, the invisible girl, was exactly where she belonged, seen at last for exactly who she was.